This is going to be a quick overview of using the TI-84, some features with your calculator that you need to become really efficient with. I'm going to go pretty fast, but because I think you know quite a few of these. What might be helpful is to have the homework sheet out that has some sample problems where you can jot down some notes if you need to try to remember some of these calculator functions and where they're located. Okay, so the first one on that sheet is the cube root. If you go to math, you're going to see a cube root is number 4. Number 5 is an nth root, so if you have the 4th root, 5th root, etc., but in this case we have the 3rd root, and that's where you'll find that key. Okay, next is fraction bar, and this is really important. We are going to use the fraction bar quite extensively. So to get to fraction bar, you're going to go alpha, y equals, and then number 1. We won't use mixed numbers, so you can ignore the others. But there's how you can get a fraction bar, and we'll use that for typing functions in addition to fractions. Now, when you use a fraction bar, your answer will be in the form of a fraction. So just so that you know that. So that's the fraction bar. The absolute value is going to be back to math. Then your arrow right to number, ABS, absolute value. We'll use that quite a bit. I think yours says 5.65, but that's going to be the same answer, so I'll just put in a negative. So that's absolute value. Okay, a fractional exponent. You're going to use the caret button, and you can do 2 divided by 3, or you could do the fraction bar there. So any exponent, you can use the caret. If your exponent is a squared, you can use the squared button as kind of a shortcut. Okay, next is e to the negative 2. E to the x is located above the ln button. So we'll go second, e to the x, e to the negative 2. And ln is here, same place. 9.54, those are 2 common functions that we'll use here in calculus. Okay. Your trig functions can be found right here. Sine, cosine, tangent. So to do tan of 1.5. Okay, first of all, actually before we go too far, let's just click on mode and let's make sure we're in radians. We need to be in radians the entire time. We will only work in radians in calculus. So back to the screen. Since I'm in radians, I'm good to go. So tan of 1.5, that's how you would do that. Okay, and then our next problem is secant. So secant isn't one of the functions that's available to us, but secant is the inverse of cosine. So I can do fraction bar. So I can do 1 over cosine of 2. That's how I would do secant. Okay, now inverse sine is located right here. So we'll go second inverse sine of 1, which actually that's pi over 2. And arctan is the same as inverse tan. Arc sine is the same as inverse sine. Those are synonymous. You know what I mean? So I'm going to go second for inverse tan or arctan, and that's pi over 4. Okay, so those are some of the main features that we're going to be using on our calculator. Next, I'm going to show you how to find zeros. We'll go to y equals. You put your function in. So we've got an x squared, subtract 3x, subtract 7. We'll graph that. Okay, I'm just going to find one of the zeros. So you would just repeat the same process if you wanted to find the other zero. So we would do second. Calc is right here. That's what we want. Second calc. Number 2 is 0. The left boundary is going to be on the left side. The right boundary will be on the right side. And then hit enter, and that will give us the 0. So the 0 right there is negative 1.54. To find a minimum or maximum value, we just go back to second trace for calc. Number 2 is a 0. So arrow, enter, and then arrow to the right. Hit enter again, and that will get, oops. Hold on, what did I do wrong? Let me try again. Graph, second calc, I got distracted. Graph, second calc, minimum, number 3. Maybe I hit the wrong button. So I'm going to go to the left side of the minimum. Then I'm going to go to the right side of the minimum. There we go. And that's our minimum value, or our vertex. Okay, we're going to find the maximum of a different function. So if I want those functions to be on the same graph, I'm just going to go down to y2, and we have a negative x to the 4th. Subtract x squared. Whoops. Oh my goodness. And then subtract 4. Sorry about that. Okay, so now my red function is going to show to find that maximum value there. You just repeat the same process. Second calc, number 4 is the maximum. I need to say which function, I need to get over to the right-hand function. Oops. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you this. You can turn this off. Enter. Do you see that? And now that function is no longer going to be showing. Okay. Second calc, maximum. I'm going to go to the left. I might get a little closer to make it more accurate. Enter. Go to the right. Enter. Enter again. And there's my maximum value. Okay, to evaluate a function, I'm going to go back to my y equals. I might clear these out because I'm done with these. I'm going to enter my function into y equals 1.5 x squared, subtract 7.25 x, and plus 10.1. I'm going to hit graph. Okay, now if I want to find h of 3/2, if I go to my table, actually I've already changed this, but let me show you. If you go second window for table set, you can actually change the independent variable to ask. So second window above it says table set, and if you hit ask, the nice thing is you can put any value into your table. So for example, I might do 3/2, and there's my value right there, 2.6. Okay, so these are from earlier. I did these earlier. So that's one way. Another way, this is probably the method I would use, is I'd go back to the calculator screen, go to vars, yvars, function, and that function is in y1, and I'm going to do parentheses 3/2. Okay, and there is my function evaluated at 3/2. Okay, to do a composite function, I'm going to go back here, clear this out. Let's say f of x is x squared, subtract 2x. And my g of x is sine of x squared. Okay, so I need to remember y1 is f of x. y2 is g of x. So go back to your calculator screen. You can go vars, yvars, function y1, and then inside of that function, vars, yvars, function y2. And I want to evaluate f of g of 3.2. And I'm going to finish out my parentheses here. And that's how you can evaluate a composite function. And then next is solving. Two different options for solving. We'll do the first one. Go back to your graph. We'll clear these out. Here is an example of where we want to do the fraction bar. I'm going to have y1 equal the left-hand side of the function. So alpha y equals for the fraction bar. Here's an example of when you want to use that fraction bar. So 19 over 2 plus e, so second ln to get the e, tan x. Okay, so that is the left-hand side of my equation. And then in y2, I'm going to put the right-hand side of my equation. And then I'm going to graph those, and I'm going to look for where they intersect. And they're going to intersect several places. But let's say I was given the range between, let's say it was in between 2 and 5. So it would be this intersection point right here. That was the interval. So we would go to second calc, number 5 intersect, and I'm going to arrow over a little bit. First curve, okay, what? This is kind of weird. I'll just go, there we go. First curve, enter, second curve, enter, and there's my intersection point. Okay, another method, instead of finding the intersection, this is what I prefer to do, because if your value, sometimes they may not intersect in your window, and that can be a problem. So option 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that equation equal to 0. I'm going to move the 7 over, and I'm going to move that subtract x over to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to go to math, number, absolute value, x cubed, subtract 4x, arrow out, and then I'm going to subtract that 7 to the other side, and then I'm going to add the x from the other side. So that equation is now set equal to 0. And now I'm just going to look for the zeros. So I've got 2 zeros. Let's say I'm interested in this 0 right here. This would be one of the solutions, and this is the second solution. And you would just go second calc 0. And we've already done that, so I'm not going to show you that. But that's a way to solve for this equation. It has 2 solutions. Okay, I'm actually going to change my mind on this last function. I want to show you how to store a value. So let's go back. I gave you 2 easy equations for finding zeros to evaluate a new function. But those functions end up being 1, which you would never store a 1. But you might store this value because that's not a whole number. So let's go to second graph. Oops, excuse me. Second calc for trace. Second trace for calc. Let's do number 2, 0. Let's arrow over. We'll do this left-hand one. Enter. Go to the right-hand side. Enter. Enter. Okay, so here's my solution right here. Okay, so what I want to do is store that value. So this is very simple. You just exit out of the graph to the calculator screen and then hit enter. Oops. Oh man, let's see what happened. Let's do second. Let's just type x. Oops, I don't want them. Okay, let me quit. Oh, so there's always a glitch. Okay, I'm going to hit the X button. I'm sorry, that's what you want to do. Hit X, hit enter, and there's that X value. And if I want to store this as a different variable, X can be confusing, especially when we start integrating. So I might want to call this A. So what I'm going to do is go to the store button, which is right here, store, to store a value. So the answer is going to be stored, and I'm going to pick A. So if I go alpha A, that value is now stored. So for example, if I wanted to, let's do like math, let's do the integral. Let's say I wanted to integrate from -5 to this long value, and without having to type it in, I can just go alpha A. I can type an A in there. Okay, and now I'm just going to make this up. We'll do x squared. and then dx. And if you can't remember what an integral is, we'll go over it. But this is how you can store a value instead of retyping it, because that can open you up to some errors. Okay, so that's storing a value. So let me repeat that since I messed it up. So you find the 0, then you hit the X button, enter, and it will give you this value. And then you store, and then you name it. You pick a letter. I always like to just start with A. Okay, so those are some of the functions that you need to know for your calculator for right now. And I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.